I'm now going to take you through how the merge function works. It's essential as it is the number one way in how you can layer your elements within Nuke. So we've got our stadium MOV, which I've imported. I'm going to import another image. I'm going to go with this Nuke logo here, very nice and generic, why not? And if you wanted to test this out yourself, ideally I would bring in an image that has alpha or has a transparent background. I've already talked a little bit about how an alpha channel works, so if you need a refresher on that, or if you aren't sure about what I'm talking about, feel free to check out my prior videos. We've got our two separate images. Say for instance, okay, our brief would be to combine these two together to have this image here of the Nuke logo slapped over the top of this stadium background. To do so, we would need a merge node. Now, there are a couple ways to create a merge node. Hit tab and type in merge, and as you see here, the very first option that we get here is the one we need, and this is what a merge node looks like. The quicker way to load or generate a merge node is that if you hit M on the keyboard, it will create a merge node that way, a lot more quicker than just typing it through the tab option. All right, now to understand what this node does and what we're looking at, this is how I like to break it down. So the B pipe is essentially considered the background and the A pipe is considered the foreground. That's how I like to see it, and that's how I like to keep it as simple as possible. So with that in mind, how can we identify which one out of these two images is the background and which is the foreground? Well, if the brief is for this element to sit on top of this element here, then that means that the stadium MOV will be our background and the Nuke logo will be our foreground. Now that we have established that, I can put the B pipe into the background. So I'll put the B pipe into the stadium MOV. To actually connect it, you can just hold, drag, click the pipe and then just pull it over to whatever node or file you want to connect it into. And then we've got the A pipe here, which will connect into our foreground element, which is the Nuke logo. Now that we've done that, how I like to usually organize it, because usually with more elaborate and complicated Nuke scripts, there'd be about 20 of these different merge nodes, if not even more, running down through the script, and it can get very busy and very messy. So what I typically like to do, just to make it as neat as possible, like for instance, let's just say that there's like, you know, a handful of different merge nodes that are being connected. As you can see here, you want to keep this B pipe as straight and as uniform as possible. And you would want to try and avoid doing as much work, whether it be like adding a node or whatever on this B pipe as you possibly can. Obviously, there are some exceptions. You want to try and keep whatever element you're adding to the background as a separate connection to the B pipe. And in this case, through a merge and through the A pipe, if that makes sense. I'll delete those for the time being. Now, okay, so now that we've got this merge connecting and combining the two elements, if we were to select our merge node and then hit one on our keyboard to view it, as you can see here, the foreground Nuke logo is slapped over the top of the background stadium video file. Even though it is working, there's a bit of weirdness going on here. Notice how this image of the Nuke logo isn't fitting perfectly on the background image. This box here is essentially the boundary for this Nuke logo. What's happening here is that if we were to view the Nuke logo, the format of this Nuke logo is actually a lot larger than the 1080p format that we set earlier. And what's happening here, because this logo is actually a bigger format and a bigger size than the background, it's overlapping the edge of the frame here, and it actually ends up here, which is where this grey box is drawn. To fix that, well, there are a couple of ways you can fix it, but the most ideal, optimal way of fixing this is to create a reformat node. Now, to create a reformat node, you can hit tab and then hit and type in reformat. As you can see here, this one here, this first option is the node that we're looking for. Now this little node here, it's in the name. You can change the format of a particular image and have it match to whatever the format in the project settings that you set. So for instance, we know that I've set the project settings here to 1080p. So what that will do is that when I create the Reformat node and then connect it to this Nuke logo, it will tell Nuke, okay, change the 3111 by 709 format to 1080p. And then what that does, because now this format is being changed with this Reformat node to 1080p, the formats for this Nuke logo as well as the background match. If I was to disable it, to disable a node, you can click on it and hit D. This is before Reformat and this is after. As you can see, the Reformat has fixed that issue with the Nuke logo and now it sits perfectly over the background. This is a simple A over B merge.
You can manipulate your node tree and its corresponding pipes. So for instance, I can take this, I can drag it, I can reposition it. If you were to hold down Control, you see how there's a bunch of yellow dots that appear throughout each pipe. If I was to click on one of these and let go of Control, it will create a little bullet point or a dot point. What you can use this for is, well, you can use it to maintain the efficiency and the flow of your node graph or node tree. You can also view through it, and then you can also create another collection of nodes connecting and branching off it, further down. So it's handy to know because it can help your script become as neat as possible. All right, now with that out of the way, let's get into some of the fun stuff. So first and foremost, the transform node, which I'll demo now. To create the transform node, you can either hit tab and go transform, or you can hit T on your keyboard, which is the shortcut for it. When you create the transform, make sure that you connect it after your reformat, as this reformat should be remained untouched after you've changed it. It should only be any alterations should be done after the reformat. So when you create the transform node, you'll notice how there's a little dial that presents itself in the middle of the viewer. If you were to hit Q on your keyboard, you can toggle this on and off. It also toggles off the format border that you see here. But when you turn it on, which is the overlay, sorry, I used the wrong term for it. Q is the overlay. And as you can see here, when you turn it on and off, it tells you when it's on and off. So when you leave that on, when you're using a transform node, and as you see, this little gizmo thing here, and then what you can do is, if you want this by default, it's already pretty center, or it's already centered with our Nuke logo here, but there are some cases where it'll end up like not centered, like by default, it will end up like here, for instance. If you want to fix this, you hold down Control, and then you click on this and Control drag it and move it to center it as close to the center of the element that you would like to transform. The reason why you need to do it like this is because, for instance, if this little thing was up here, if I was to not hold down Control, it would actually start to transform the actual image, which is what we don't want. So make sure that this is as center to this element as possible. Now, if we have a look at the properties panel for the transform node, we've got, translation across X and Y, as well as rotation, scale, skew on the X. As you can see here, creates this skewing effect, and you can do the same thing on the Y axis as well. Create some sort of 3D looking effect there. To undo any settings, just in general, not just the transform node, you can go Control Z, and as you can see here, when I hit Control Z a bunch of times, it will reset those values in the transform setting. You can also get a little bit creative with the scale properties for the transform node. So for instance, you see here a little dial that says 2. If you were to click on that, we can manipulate the scale purely on just either the width or the height of the image. And as you can see here, you can, alter those to your liking without having to be constrained or locked to a fixed scale, if that makes sense. Another node that is, very common and basic is the grade node. So to create a grade node, you can either hit G on your keyboard, or you can just go tab and type in, well, you got to spell it properly first, but grade, which is this thing here. And this is a basic color manipulator. So if I was to hook up, or fix this a little bit here, move our transform up a bit. When I create the grade node, what this will do is it will change the color, brightness, and luminance of this Nuke logo. So for instance, the very basic one's the gain. So as you can see here, it's already a pretty white image as is, so you can't really notice that much difference when you turn up the gain. But as you can see, when I drag the gain slider down, it will darken the image almost close to black. Because it has no color and it's just a white image, you won't see much difference, but you'll still be able to get a gist of what it's doing. There's also the multiply, we've got the gamma as well, we've also got lift, and we've also got white and black points, which they all correlate to one another, but they all tweak a particular color value different from one another. Another node that's fairly common is the blur node. So if I was to hit B on my keyboard, that's the shortcut for it. Once again, if you wanted to do it manually, you can just hit tab and go blur. There's actually two different types of common blurs. I mean, there's so many different blurs nodes out there that artists within the industry use, but straight out of the box, already in Nuke, the blur and the EdgeBlur is like the most universal ones. Create a blur and attach it here, and as you can guess, if I was to change the size of this and play around with the slider, as you can see, it will blur the image. You can also change the filtering of it too. So if you're familiar with these filtering options in other software packages, whether it be After Effects or DaVinci Resolve, then you'll understand what this does. So obviously you can change the filter of it, gives you a different effect. Another different type of blur that you can use is what I said before, the EdgeBlur. And what this does is, if you just zoom in, once again, to zoom in, you can just scroll on your mouse wheel. And as you can see here, if I was to disable this EdgeBlur, you can see the effect that it's doing there. It's given a nice, because as you see by default, the Nuke logo's edges are pretty sharp. If I was to apply this, as you can see, it gives a nice fall off and just a neater look overall.